She is an excellent writer, a terrific journalist, Randi Druzin. She has covered it all. Today, we talk about her latest book, Behind the Mask. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up. Our guest today hails from Toronto. She was a veteran journalist and author. She worked for the Globe and Mail, the National Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, currently works for the CBC. She's covered 4 Olympics. She is the author of The Riverton Rifle, The Reggie Leach Story, Between the Pipes, and most recently, Behind the Mask. Welcome to the program, Randi Druzin. Good to see you. Thanks
Good
for
to
doing
see you
this.
too. I'm happy to be here.
So we like to start at the beginning. How did you get into the business of writing and journalism?
I just loved writing when I was a kid, and I was sort of a news junkie just by osmosis, because there were always newspapers on the kitchen table, and my parents were always talking about news. So I just thought it seemed like a good fit for me, and I just gravitated towards it. And it's been a long time now, but I don't have any regrets.
Okay, so you covered it all, including political events, a Van Halen concert. Tour, I guess it was. Tell us what the Van Halen tour was like. I got to hear that.
It wasn't, I'm sad to say, it wasn't the entire tour. It was just one concert I went to here at the ACC, and I guess it was 2007. And I wrote about it from the vantage point of someone who had had a crush on David Lee Roth in high school.
Oh, okay.
And it was just sort of an interesting take, but, ended up sitting fairly close to Eddie Van Halen, and it was amazing. It was like having a front seat to, the Beethoven of electric guitars. So it was great.
No kidding. Eddie V was definitely a guitar god, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you venture from there into the sports realm, or what prompted you to direct your energy into the sports books?
Well, I know when I was in journalism school, the profs told us you need to pick an area of specialty. And I thought at the time, I'm 22, I need to be a very serious journalist. I'm going to cover politics. And I started that way, doing local politics. And I was fairly bored by it. So my boyfriend at the
Yeah.
time said, "Hey, you know what? You love sports, so why not just write about what you know?" So that's how I ended up writing about sports. I decided at a certain point it would be my specialty. And again, no regrets about that decision either.
Right. Okay. Clearly a hockey fan, and obviously you got a thing for goaltenders because you've written 2 books about goaltenders. The latest being Behind the Mask. Very
Yeah.
clever writing here. Really enjoyed this book. Congratulations. No,
Thank
so
you.
tell me what is the attraction about goaltenders?
Well, the goaltenders, they're a breed apart. And I know actually there's a goalie book that has that title, but they really are a breed apart. They sort of play their own game within the larger context, just like a relief pitcher does in baseball or a closing pitcher. It's the pitcher, the batter, and the catcher. Whereas goalies, it's very similar. They're on a team, but their pursuit is very individual in a sense, if you think about it. The other players all work in a coordinated effort, whereas the goalie really stands alone. And at the end of the day, the buck stops with the goalie. So they have this mental toughness and in some cases this eccentricity, which makes them very, very interesting.
So the mental toughness, the eccentricity, and is there any other commonality? Something you could say, yeah, this is true for pretty much all goaltenders.
Yeah, I would say they're different from each other in many ways, but one way in which they're all similar that I've noticed is that they all have this supreme ability to let setbacks just roll off their back. Like Patrick Waugh, he got shelled that night in Montreal,
Right.
said he was never going to play there again, demanded a trade, and he still skated off the ice that night, thinking he was the best goaltender in the world. And it's that kind of confidence and unflappability that really makes goaltenders great, and actually a little bit different from the other players in many ways.
Right. Yeah. I remember. We all remember that night. And now Patrick was in your last book. Let's talk
That's
about the
right.
group you selected for this particular group. Why? What? Is there any specific reason for this collection?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. After I wrote the last book, I got a lot of emails and letters from people who liked the book, and I got some complaints too. And a lot of those complaints were, why is Jerry Cheevers just a sidebar in this book? Why doesn't he have his own chapter? What about Tony Esposito? Why is he not in this book? So, after a few years, I started thinking about the possibility of doing another book. And I thought, you know what? Why not do another goalie book? I love goalies, I love writing about them. And clearly, I need to write about Tony Esposito and Jerry Cheever. So why not?
Okay, let's go through these goaltenders that you selected. First off, Roger Crozier, you called him the nervous wreck.
Yeah,
He's one of 14 children in a family born in Bracebridge, Ontario. Not many people can
right.
say that. Is that one of the things that led him to being a nervous wreck, or what was it?
I think it was just his disposition. Like it wasn't anything in particular. He had some physical ailments, pancreatitis, ulcer. He had a lot of gastrointestinal issues. Um, it was just his disposition. He was just a nervous kind of guy and he wanted to do his best. And he felt the pressure more than most. But then again, he worked through it. He wasn't one of those players that just sort of collapsed after 2 or 3 seasons and couldn't take it anymore. He did, have his moments, but he always persevered. And at one point, he retired or tried to retire, decided to come back. So in the end, he had that same toughness I was just talking about. It just took him a while to find it, I guess.
Right, because yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, he's a small guy, 5'8", 160 pounds, developed ulcers at a very young age and pancreatitis. And, as you mentioned, quit, became a carpenter for a while. And then he
Yep.
decided, this is enough of this. I'm going to go back to goaltending. At least he broke his jaw. Okay, so he got beat up quite a bit, and we have this play right here. A Frank
Yeah.
Mahovlich blast off the face, and that blast
Yeah.
broke his jaw. And I think that
Yeah.
was one of the reasons that prompted him to quit originally. Is that correct?
It was a combination of factors. It was just that kind of roughness on the ice. Um, Essentially, he was in peril every time he stepped on the ice, and for a lot of goaltenders, that was okay. For him, not as much, but he worked through it, And I spoke to his daughter, and she said one of the reasons he decided to come out of that short-lived retirement is because he just thought, you know, I can provide better, working as a hockey player than I can working as a carpenter. It's just a better living. So it was sort of a practice. Well,
Especially if he's playing in today's day and age, and we're hearing
well, yeah,
William
that goes
Nylander's
without saying.
contract might be somewhere up above the $11 million mark. So I think that today, I think if you've got a choice between carpentry and the NHL, there's not a lot of time for thought about that one. You just go,
Yeah,
it's pretty a no brainer. So, okay, so he did come back to the NHL, as you mentioned, and actually
hmm,
played for a long time. A very acrobatic goaltender. Um,
yeah.
and what made him stand out from some of the other goaltenders of his era, or even today?
I think, for one, it was the nervousness. He was a nervous wreck, but also his playing was so acrobatic. It was sort of Dominik Hasek before Dominik Hasek. So at that time, you imagine how it was to watch Hasek in the 90s when people are like, what the hell is this guy doing? Just imagine what it was like, 20, 30 years earlier. It was really phenomenal. And people's reactions to it were a little mixed at first, but, the results spoke for themselves. So obviously he was doing something right.
Clearly, and he was also a Conn Smythe Trophy winner. Not a lot of
Yes.
people can say that.
Yes.
Right?
Not a lot of goaltenders. And I think Reggie Leach was the other person, was I think the only non goaltender on a losing team to win that award.
Right. Right. I think Hextall won it, and yeah, so it's yeah, not a lot of people can say that for sure. Okay,
Yeah.
so great goaltender. Well, let's move on now to Rogi Vachon, the Castaway. How'd you come up with that name?
Well, I mean, he played in Montreal as well. But his days there were numbered when Ken Dryden came on the scene. Vachon said the best years of his life were playing in Los Angeles. And at the time, that was sort of the wilderness. Like it's not the way it is today. At the time, people didn't have 24-hour news cycles. They weren't aware of what was going on in every game in the league at all times. And the only way, really, for the majority of hockey fans who lived in the East to hear about Vachon was to see like a little snippet, on the 11 o'clock news or read about it in the paper. So he was sort of doing great things, but doing them away from the gaze of most hockey fans. So that's how I came up with that name.
He was able to break in with the Habs, but in the beginning, it looked like that was going to be a tough thing to do. But he got a couple of lucky breaks. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean the Habs, they had great goaltenders, but they kept getting injured or they had other reasons to be off the ice. So he got the call. And, that's the same with a lot of success stories in every profession. You find like I think Marlon Brando was an understudy, until the main actor was sick or injured and Marlon Brando got his break and now we all know Marlon Brando. It was very similar for Vachon. He had some lucky breaks to get his start with the Canadians, and then he went from there. But again, despite his success in Montreal, he still to this day will look back on his time in Los Angeles as being the best of his career.
Right, and the lucky breaks to get the job in Montreal, but then sort of the unlucky break to get out of there when Ken Dryden came along and stole the show.
Yeah.
But you know, um, he won a couple of Stanley Cups after Worsley got hurt.
Mhm.
Beat the mighty Bruins, and I love these quotes: "Lashing and plunging like an enraged animal," or one of the quotes you took from the sports writers of the day. And he left Bruins fans crying in their clam chowder.
I have to tell you, everyone needs to know that was not my quote. That is
Right.
that is not
Right.
the
I
way
know.
I
No.
write.
Okay. I thought I made that clear. But yeah, these are quotes from the sports
I
writers of
know,
the
I know.
day that
But
which are pretty good.
I think part of the you'll notice that throughout the book, I did incorporate a lot of purple prose from sports writers at the time. I think partially because it relays a sense of what people were thinking and how the goalies were perceived. And I think part of it, just for me as a journalist, it was sort of amusing to see such a different tone, like a different way of writing. Like it was so
Right.
over the top. It would never happen now. Like you would never see prose like that now. I don't think so. I haven't. So
Okay. So
I
yeah.
was chuckling
Okay.
when
But
I had those quotes.
for sure, there are some good quotes in here. But I think this one's yours, if I'm not mistaken. Vachon won a station wagon for starring in the Canada Cup. And he said
Yes,
it wasn't a Lamborghini, but it wasn't a Harvest Gold dishwasher or of a lava lamp either. That's a Randy
that's
Druzin
correct.
quote, obviously. Yeah, that was a good one.
That was I was doing the research on the 76 Canada Cup and I thought, "Oh, he was so phenomenal. What did he win? What was it he won?" A station wagon. So
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know if that would
Okay.
have it was one of those fancy station wagons with the faux wood paneling, I believe. So,
Right,
you
right.
know, maybe better
Every
than
family had one.
me. Of course.
So Rogi's inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1992. He played with some legends. We have a quote from that. Vic, let's roll that.
After my junior years, I signed a contract for Montreal Canadiens. Whoa, are you kidding me? I had a chance to play with Jean Beliveau, Henry Richard, Yvan Cournoyer, Jacques Lemaire, Frank Mahovlich, and the legend coaching Toe Blake and Scotty Bowman. What a dream.
So that's quite a collection of talent he was surrounded with in that particular time,
Mhm.
wouldn't you say? Right?
Oh
Like you
yeah,
mentioned as
absolutely.
well, the best
And
times
I
were in
think
L.A., weren't they?
they were. I mean, I think he loved his life in LA and he liked playing on a new team and kind of putting them on the map. But it's still I think Canadians fans still wonder what would have happened if Dryden hadn't come on the scene. What would Vachon have done in Montreal? I mean, we'll never know, but we can assume he would have done quite well,
Well, he had a
and
pretty
I
good
think he
team. He's
might have
had a pretty good team around him. Yeah.
yeah, and pretty good. And I
Yeah.
think he may have been inducted earlier than he was, if he'd been playing on the East Coast, which I think it was Bill Barber. When I interviewed him for that chapter, that's what he said too.
Right. Yeah. It was not help. It was hockey's wasteland at the time, wasn't it?
Exactly.
So on we move to Jerry Cheevers, the character. Okay. So why the character?
Well, anyone who's even spoken to Jerry Cheevers for 15 minutes knows why. I mean, the man's a lot of fun to speak to. He's a great sense of humor. He likes to have fun, and it was never a dull moment with him. And some of the anecdotes I came across of him, smoking a cigar in the dressing room or doing his best to convince his coach he was injured and couldn't participate in practice. I mean, it was a really interesting chapter to write, and I never had. There were never moments where I thought. The problem with the Cheevers chapter was there was too much to work with. Like there was too many interesting
Right.
anecdotes, funny experiences. So I had to really pick and choose which ones to go with.
That could have been a book in itself, right, Jerry? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, he loved the horses. He loved Toronto, but there was no spot for him Toronto. Tell us about
Right.
Cheesy's journey to the NHL.
Well, Cheesy ended up. I don't know if he was like expected to do great things in Boston when he arrived, but he arrived and it was just the perfect time. You know, he had Orr, he had Esposito, Johnny Busick. He just had like a great cast around him, and he played a pivotal role on that team, like in terms of not just their performance on the ice, but in the dressing room. Like he was an essential part of that team, and I think it was just the perfect storm for him. He just got there at the right time, and he had the right players around him. It was a magical time for him, for the team, and for fans of the Boston Bruins.
So, Behind the Mask is the book, and Cheever's mask might be the most famous of them all. Tell us about the mask that he wore.
Well, I think anyone who's a fan of Jerry Cheevers knows that the mask came about in a very interesting way where he didn't want to participate in a practice. So he just walked off the ice or skated off the ice, rather. He was in the dressing room. One of the trainers, I think it was Forstall, said, "Hey, I'll just paint some stitches on your mask so you can go back out there and tell Sinden that you got injured." So he did that. It didn't work. He ended up having to go back on the ice, but they decided every time he got hit in the face with a puck, they would add a stitch to the mask.
Wow.
And so that
And look at
mask
that.
became so iconic. Yeah. And I believe, I
Yeah.
could be wrong, but I think that mask is still with his grandson and not in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. But
It
anyone,
should
even the
be. It
casual
should
hockey
be. Yeah.
fan,
Right.
recognizes that mask. It's iconic.
So, 71, 72 seasons, Cheevers went undefeated in 32 straight starts. I'm sure that's still a record. He was obviously feeling pretty feisty at the time, getting into it here with Forbes Kennedy of the
Yeah.
Leafs. And,
Yeah.
a guy who wasn't, like you mentioned, he's a character. He wasn't afraid to get involved.
No, he wasn't at all. And the thing is, he liked to have fun, but when he was on the ice, he was serious. Like he was a fierce competitor, and you didn't want to piss him off. You don't want to piss him off too much in his goal crease, because he'd let you know about it. As you can see,
Right.
he did not shy away from confrontation.
Right. There's Johnny Bauer. Interesting. So, what would you say is the one thing that sticks out the most, other than the mask and the fact that he was a character? Is there one story that is quite reminiscent of Jerry Cheevers?
Yeah, I do remember reading. I was surprised at how passionate he was about horse racing, and that he invested and he had some horses. And I just thought it was really entertaining to have, like, getting prepared for a playoff game. Reporters would come into the dressing room, after a morning skate, and he'd be talking to them about horse racing, just reading the racing
Mm.
pages, like, no big deal. I'm more interested in my horses right now than I am in talking to you. And oh, yeah, we have a playoff game tonight. So no big, I'm fine. I just thought that epitomized Jerry Cheevers and his approach to the game. And it really worked for him.
Right. It's a good way to get your mind off the game. There's a lot of information in those racing forms. Okay, Ed Jacquemin.
Assuming.
Yeah, working class hero. Tell us about Eddie.
Oh yeah, he was I mean, his story is really inspirational because he had a serious accident, when he was young, and the stove blew up in his family's home. He was burned, like a lot of his limbs were burned. And he continued playing. Like he hid it from teammates and coaches for a while because he had to wrap up his legs. So he did that before or after they were in the dressing room. And that was very, very early on in his career. And that kind of just spoke to who he was as a competitor, that he didn't back down, he didn't give up, and didn't matter how much pain he was in or how much fruit was being pelted at him at Madison Square Garden, he was still going to get out there and do his job. So, the New York fans really took to him after a while because of that attitude.
Right. Resilient, determined, bit of a late
Yeah.
bloomer. He twice got cut by the Hamilton Junior Red Wings. So, a guy was determined. He hung in there. I mean, that wouldn't happen with a lot of guys, but he was
Yeah.
persistent indeed. Yeah.
He was persistent. The New York fans loved him. I think, I don't know if you read that chapter, but earlier on in his career, when he was just starting, they really didn't take to him because he had this tendency to wander up the ice, with the puck.
Right.
And
Right.
it drove the fans crazy. It drove his teammates and his coaches crazy. He cut back on that a little, not totally, but a little. And the fans eventually warmed up to him because they saw what his character was like.
Right. So clearly they warmed up to him because they had a very special honor for him. Had his number one race to the rafters at Madison Square Garden. And you talked about, the fact that it took him a while to warm up to him. But what was it about him specifically that really, made the fans say, I really like this guy?
It was because of his dedication to the game and his ability just to get out there and do his job no matter what else was going on. And they really appreciated that. Even when they got down on him, when his coaches got down on him, when the fans got down, they pelted him with fruit and sandwiches. He was still, I'm going to do my best for you. He never flipped them the bird. He never told them to go to hell. He never said, I'm out of here. He just kept up. And everyone knows playing in front of New York fans is not an easy thing, especially if they're not happy with you.
Okay. Another piece from your book, he got hit in the throat by Boom Boom Jeffrey not on the ice. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was an appearance on a late night talk show. And I guess they were demonstrating, just demonstrating what hockey's about for viewers who didn't really know. And he ended up paying the price for that. I think it was a few days before he could speak again after getting hit in the throat with that puck.
Right. I know what that's like. On Tuesday, I couldn't talk. No, my
Yeah,
voice is starting to come back today. Yeah, it's good.
yeah, I can hear you
So
okay.
yeah, thanks, Randy. Appreciate you being able to come on later. So anyway, Tony Esposito, the kid brother. The kid brother obviously is Phil's kid brother, but uh, what is it that made you think that, other than the fact that some people said, why didn't you have Tony Esposito in the book last time? Is that basically why you decided that he's going to be in this book?
That's a big part of it. I was afraid of the
Yeah,
blowback of Tony
yeah.
Esposito in the book. But the one thing that I found interesting when I was researching his story is that no matter what he did, despite his fabulous rookie season, he was always linked to his brother. It was always
Mm,
every article I read from that time was like Tony Esposito, another shutout, Phil's little brother. He was
mm.
always his little brother. So I thought that was a good approach to the chapter, because I could explore their childhood together. And even after Tony passed, Phil had some poignant things to say about him. So that's why I took that approach to the book. And yes, I was afraid of the wrath of readers if I didn't include Esposito in this one.
Right. So he gets called up for the first time against his brother Phil in the Bruins. Apparently,
Yeah.
Mom was a little bit upset about the game with Phil. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Phil was he loved his brother, but did not go easy on that game, and their mother was not pleased. And Phil Esposito said his mother didn't speak to him for several weeks after he scored on his brother times. But I don't know if that's true. I just know that again, it's all about the brothers. The coverage of that game was all about the brothers.
Well, knowing Phil, it could be a slight exaggeration. I mean, he has been
Yeah,
known to exaggerate on occasion.
I've heard.
But
I've heard.
yeah, but you talk about Tony, and how's this for rookie season in Chicago? A record
Yeah.
15 shutouts, a Calder Trophy, a Vezina Trophy, and a runner-up for the Hart Trophy. Not bad for the kid brother, eh?
Yeah, that's not bad at all. Made quite an impression in his first season. But again, every article that was written about him in that amazing season mentioned that he was Phil Esposito's younger brother. Like he just could
Yeah.
not escape that. But yeah, that rookie season is still one for the ages.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, you think a guy would be able to stand out on his own, winning the Calder, the Vez, and runner up for the Hart and everything else. But oh
Even
well.
on
Phil
during
was
summit,
pretty good player.
even the sum, yeah, Phil wasn't bad. Even
Yeah,
during the Summit series, I read a lot of articles about that, and again, it was Tony Esposito, in the Canadian net, Phil's younger brother. But everyone
right.
knows he was good in that series as well. Maybe not quite as good as Tretiak, as he would have said, but still very good.
Well, you talk about the Summit Series, and Paul Henderson gave
Mhm.
Tony O a lot of credit for that victory, even though, yeah, as you mentioned, you know, Tretiak was Tretiak standing on his head, but Tony O
Yeah,
made some unbelievable saves for Team Canada
yeah.
before Henderson made that, scored that incredible goal. So, I mean, without Tony's exploits right here, it
Mhm.
doesn't happen, right?
That's right. I know. I think Tony Esposito's contribution to that team sometimes gets overlooked because of Henderson and again Tony's older brother. But he played a pivotal role in that series, and there's a lot of people who will say he outshone Dryden in that series.
Right. So here's we talked about but this line here is from the book. Okay, Tony was 41, oldest player in the NHL, and you wrote advanced for an athlete, though not for a vampire, a leatherback sea turtle, or an ordinary human.
Yeah, I just like to have fun when I write. I know
Yeah.
when I wrote this book, I actually said to my editor, like, how much Randy do you want in this book? Like, how much of my voice can readers tolerate? And they're like, just go for it, And
Oh,
there were a few times where I went completely, on a tangent in that way,
what?
but the editors pulled me back when they had to. But I just like, I'm just going to write the way I write and see what happens.
Oh, of course, it was great. I mean, I chuckled several times with this book. It was awesome for
Oh,
sure.
thank you.
You want to have fun reading a book, right? So we were talking
Yeah, and
about
that's the
Tretiak
thing.
and that. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say because, my full-time job is working in national and international news, which is not
Yeah.
fun, especially
Yeah.
now. So when I do my writing, on my own, I do like to have fun and cut loose a little bit. I'm not writing about war. I'm not writing about famine or natural disasters. I'm writing about hockey, which is fun, and I like to have fun when I'm writing it.
Well, we just talked about Tretiak, so let's talk about Vladislav Tretiak, the stranger. Why the
hmm
stranger?
Well, he was an unknown entity. He was unknown. I mean, as you know, when the Summit series started, people thought they underestimated him for one, but they had no idea who he or any of his teammates were. They just seemed like animatons, in red helmets. They just were
Hmm.
unknown to Canadian fans, and it was during the Cold War, so there was a huge divide between countries that doesn't exist anymore. Um, so he was an unknown entity, and then as fans got to know him and appreciate him, he became a celebrity in Canada as well. But at the time, he was just this international man of mystery. They just didn't know who he was or what he was. And the
Yeah.
scouts
So,
didn't when
yeah, the scouts.
the scouts were watching him play ahead of time, the Canadian scouts, they saw him play. He was really awful in this one outing, and the scouts attributed it to lack of talent. What it was probably a hangover because he'd had his bachelor party the night before.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah,
timing.
yeah,
Yeah, and it worked
yeah,
out. It worked out really well because they really caught Canada by surprise. Because as you mentioned, after that, scouts said, "Oh yeah,
yes,
Canada's going to probably beat them 8-1. Every game
yeah.
it'll be just ridiculous. It'll be horrible." But
And then
obviously, it wasn't. It was a great series. Yeah.
about Jacques Plante going into the Soviets dressing room to try to give Tretiak some tips on how to face the Canadian shooters. And then Tretiak admitted later he didn't understand a word of what was being said.
Yeah,
But he
nod your head and go, "Oh,
appreciated the
yeah, yeah,
effort.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah." Well, it was a nice gesture because he felt sorry for him, I think, more than anything,
I
because
think
the
so.
poor guy's gonna get killed. Uh,
Yeah,
he did that have that one, game that he'd like to remember, the Miracle on Ice in 1980, uh, and he said if they played the Americans 100 times, they win that game once, and that was that one time, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was just everything came together for the Americans. And every now and then in sports, there's a major upset, and that's why people love, following sports. But I think, Treshek said that if we played these two teams played each other 100 times, the Americans would win once. And I think he may have been right. Maybe two, three times, but I don't think much more than that. It was really lucky for the Americans, and it was obviously a moment to remember. More for the Americans
He
than the rest.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah. Do you believe in miracles? Yeah, for sure. So,
Exactly.
a lot of Canadian, even though he didn't play here, there was a time when Montreal tried to get him here, and it looked like maybe he was
Yep.
going to, but it never happened. But a lot of Canadians were certainly aware of Tretiak. I know Sammy Jo Small patterned her style after Tretiak. Uh,
Right.
he worked with Ed Belfour and Dominic Hasek when he had a job with the Blackhawks for a while. So he did have a little bit of taste of the NHL. I'm sure it would have been nice to see him play here, but never happened. Now he heads the Russian Hockey Federation, so he has done a lot for hockey, hasn't he?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's been a great ambassador for the game, and I think it speaks volumes that during the Cold War and even now, when there's tension between the West and Russia, he's still a very popular figure with hockey fans on this side of the ocean. And I think a lot of fans regret that he never actually got to play in the NHL for the Montreal Canadiens, which is what he wanted and what the Canadians wanted. I guess we'll never know, but I feel like he may have won some Vezinas himself, if he'd played in the NHL.
Oh, no question. He was a special goaltender. Mike Palmateer, the shooting star. Tell us why
Yeah.
Mike Palmateer is in your book, and tell us about the shooting star.
Well, I just thought I want to include a Leafs goalie. And, Bauer's in the last book. A lot of the greats are in the last book. And I just thought, you know what? Curtis Joseph has his own book. Palmateer is not written about that often, but for a very brief moment, he was phenomenal. Like, he was really, really good. And I think he would have been really good for a lot longer if he hadn't had those wonky knees. So I knew I would get a little criticism for Palmateer, but I decided to go with it anyway. And, there's a lot of fans of the Leafs who love Palmateer, and I'm one of them. So it was a fun chapter to work on.
Yeah, no, Leaf fans are not going to argue with that choice at all. And
Right.
he burst into prominence and get Game 7, that's 7-game stunner over the Islanders in 1978.
Yeah.
I remember it well. Game 7, you talked about in the book, fans booing the Canadian anthem. Logic is the first casualty of war, was the quote from you.
Yeah, well, I
And
just thought, they're Canadian players. So,
right,
I just thought, you're cheering
yeah.
for a team full of Canadian players and then booing the Canadian national anthem. It just seems illogical to me.
For sure it does. All but 4, I believe, were Canadian. So here we go.
Yeah.
It's Billy Harris with a steal in double overtime in that series. But
Yep.
Palmateer is going to rob. And of course, you talked about this particular
Yep.
situation right there. Harris with the steal in the book. How big was that save?
Oh, huge. I mean, it would have changed. I mean, look at that. I'm watching it now and I'm amazed.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
feel like if he hadn't made that save and Lanny McDonald wouldn't have scored that goal and we wouldn't all be talking about it today. So, but I remember watching that when I was a kid. I think I was so excited watching that game with some friends that I jumped up, when McDonald scored that goal, broke my mother's vase, and still hear about it today. But it was worth it. It was worth it.
Oh, yeah. You can get another vase. You're not going to beat the Islanders in those days. Again, that was pretty amazing,
That's what I
amazing
tried to
victory for the
explain to
Leafs.
her. I tried
And
to explain that to her. She wasn't really receptive.
yeah. And that was certainly one of the best, greatest saves in Leafs history. I can't think of
Yes.
anyone bigger than that. Well, the Curtis Joseph made a couple of that back when,
Oh
but
yeah, he made quite a few.
that was, you know, so, and also Palmy made a nice save in that outdoor alumni game on a penalty
Yeah.
shot. Thomas Holmstrom,
Yeah.
but showing his acrobatic ability right here, right?
And then that was it.
Yeah,
That
he
was
had to leave the game after that, right?
Well,
Oops, the body can't do the things it used to anymore. Help
I
me.
remember him saying that his brain, he knew exactly what he had to do, but his body wasn't entirely cooperative. So,
Right.
but he gave us a glimpse of who he was as a goaltender. So for a brief
Yeah,
moment, yeah,
for sure. Great
he was so
anticipation,
He was
great save.
so much fun to watch,
Perfect.
and talking to his teammates from the time, they all really loved him. They thought he was a lot of fun in the dressing room too. So, like Tiger Williams and Bruce Boudreau, they all had great things to say about him.
And it's a shame, that Leafs team showed so much promise in 1978. What do
I
you think
know.
was the biggest issue for that? What was the biggest problem with that
The
demise of
biggest
that team?
problem, I would say Harold Ballard.
Right.
Biggest
Okay.
problem
There you go.
for them for a long time. And God, if someone else had been at the helm, who knows what the Leafs would have been capable of. They had such a good team at that time. Sittler and McDonald, Salming, Turnbull, Palmateer, they could have done great things if not for the ego of Ballard and Punch Imlach, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
Right. No, and there's a lot of people on side with that. You're not going to
Yeah.
get a lot of argument in Toronto, and that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Grant Fuhrer, the survivor. Why the
Yeah.
survivor?
Well, anyone who knows even a little bit about Grant Fuhrer know he had to overcome a lot of obstacles. I mean, when he was younger, it was very rare to see like a black person, playing hockey. And it was a big issue for a lot of people. For him, it wasn't. He said, no, I'm just a hockey player. I don't want to be thought of as a black hockey player. But that was something he had to deal with. He also had a substance abuse problem later on, which everyone knows about, and he and the team had to deal with. So he did have a lot of setbacks in that way, and some injuries too. Like, don't forget that collision with Nick Kyprios.
Right.
But he came back from all of them. And when he was at the end of his career, and they just thought he's starting to wind it down now, he was great. He was doing a great job in St. Louis, and they didn't expect him to. So he was a survivor.
Yeah, and you mentioned he felt in the dressing room he was just one of the guys. That race thing was never an issue in the dressing room. He said, I looked around, there's guys from Sweden or whatever. There's guys from everywhere, and it just didn't matter. We were all teammates. We're all pushing for the same goal, and that's one of the reasons he loved hockey. You mentioned he played for 3 hockey teams at the same time as a kid. How would you pull that off? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of, I think people will cut you a lot of slack if you're really, really good at what you do, and Grant Fuhrer was really good at what he did. And he was different than the other goalies in terms of his temperament. Like, he was very relaxed and very sort of, oh, well, I mean, when one of his teammates scored on him, in the playoffs, and
Steve Smith,
Oilers fans still suffering, but he just kind of shrugged it off and said, yeah, that's just the way it goes sometimes. Not a lot of goalies would have that attitude. So I think that's what helped make him a survivor, was that attitude.
Yeah, and when they won the Stanley Cup the following year, first guy that Wayne Gretzky handed the cup to was Steve Smith. That was pretty awesome. Speaking of Gretzky, both he and Jacques Demers called Grant Fuhrer the greatest goaltender of all time. Are you thinking that he's in that realm?
Well, he's definitely one of the best of all time, which is why I wrote about him. But if you were to ask him, and I did, I said, what do you think of this quote? He's like, oh, I don't know. I think there's a few guys better than me. So he himself would tell you Gretzky may have been a little bit too effusive in his praise. But I think Gretzky said that because Fuhrer was there when you needed him. He was a clutch goalie. When the Chips, he would let in 5 goals. But if he needed to keep one out for the team to win, he would. He kept out the goals he needed to.
Right. And I remember when I talked to him, we had him on the show a while back, and he talked about being in the dressing room, and Randy Gregg talked about this too when I had him on, and Kevin Lowe. So they would be down 4-2, 4-3, and he'd just say to the guys, "Look at guys, go out there and score some goals because they're not getting any more," and they didn't get any more. I mean, they win a lot of games like 7-6, but Grant Fuhrer was going to make sure that they didn't get that last goal to tie it. And so, he won a lot of a lot of awards. It's 5 Stanley Cups. The only number he was concerned about, though, wins and losses. I had him on the show, as I mentioned, and he talked about backstopping that incredible gold medal win in the '87 Canada Cup. Let's listen to that. Would you say that maybe that was the best hockey ever played?
It's some of the most enjoyable. And a lot of people don't like 6-5 games. To me, it doesn't matter. It was a lot of fun to play in. Would you like to give up less goals? Yeah, you would. But at the same time, you're playing against the best players in the world. And I think that's what everybody wants to do. 1, I get to play with the best players. 2, you're playing against the best players. So it's the most elite group of players that there was in hockey at that time. And the fact that I got the opportunity to play and we won just makes it that much more special.
So so Mike Keenan's coaching that team. His goaltender, Ron Hextall, who had just won the Hart Trophy, or not the Hart Trophy, but the Conn Smythe Trophy, And he chooses Grant Fuhr to play every single game in that series. Tells you something, doesn't it?
I mean, they went with him once, and they just decided, based on what they saw, they should keep him there, and it obviously paid off. And the fear that you were just showing is the same fear that I spoke to, like exactly the same kind of, hey, we want fewer goals, yeah, we do, but so what? We won. That's all that matters.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Like he was really great to have in the dressing room. Like his teammates to this day, if you ask any of his teammates at the time, they have nothing but good things to say about him.
So Roberto Luongo, crowd pleaser.
Yeah, he was fun to write about. Anyone who's looked at his tweets knows why he's fun to write about. Like, I think he was maddening to a lot of fans because he could be brilliant and then awful, in back-to-back games. But he was always entertaining. And I guess that was, I shouldn't say always, I should say that became part of his persona later on in his career when he felt more comfortable in expressing himself. But yeah, I would say maddening and entertaining were the two things with Luongo. And obviously he's a very talented goalie as well.
Hard to believe that this guy had a hard time public speaking. Yeah, when you follow his Twitter account, the guy's hilarious. Yeah. And yeah. What's his Twitter handle again? I can't remember. Do you have it? Remember?
No, I don't. But I do remember.
Okay. It's not hard. Look it up. You just if somebody wants to know, they just look it up. It's Roberto Luongo. Not hard.
Strombone, maybe Strombone.
Strombone. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it.
That. Yeah, off to the
Strombone one. Strombone one. That's
okay,
it.
There you
Strombone
go.
one. Thank you, Victor, for that. Thank you. That's pretty
great Twitter.
Okay. So a recent Hall of Fame inductee, his idol was another Hall of Famer, Fuhr, who we just saw from. Not because of the cups, but because of the fast glove hand. Did you find that interesting? That's why he was, that Grant Fuhr was his idol.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I thought he would, that he would have spent his childhood envisioning hoisting the Stanley Cup, but it was more about making amazing saves like Grant Fuhr. And by the way, the kind of saves you would see Fuhr make at that time, you might not see as often now. I'm watching the B-roll now as it's running. And I'm thinking, goalies now are trained to anticipate and to be where the puck is going before it gets there, whereas goalies were more reactive back in those days.
Right.
They're sprawling kick saves and glove saves.
Those are two amazing saves right there.
Yeah.
So one point, Luongo got hit in the hand. Thought he might have broken his hand, and this is from your book. And Jamie McLennan said, "No, you're fine. Get back out there."
Yeah.
Tell us about what was that all about?
Well, I was asking when I interviewed Jamie. I was asking him, like, tell me some of the things you remember most fondly about your time with him, and that was something that came up. That he was just like joking around with Luongo because he was that kind of guy. You could joke around with him. You might not make a comment like that to Patrick Waugh, but to Luongo you could. Like, no, I think your hand's fine. Just go. I'm sitting on the bench. I'm eating popcorn. I'm watching the game. You get out there and do your job because I don't feel like it right now.
Yeah. Noodles is a pretty calm, cool, collected guy. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So the only goaltender to captain his team, that was interesting. An interesting scenario.
Yeah, that was an interesting experiment. There was a lot of people questioning the decision at the time, but there was others who thought it made sense because he was sort of the leader in the dressing room. But leading in the dressing room and leading on the ice is a little different, because he can't be, in the face-off circle and chatting with the refs, by the bench on a regular basis. So I think after a while, he just said, I just need to focus on the goaltending and not have to focus on this other job, which is being a captain during the games.
Right. And did all right, though. Hall of Famer. Marc-Andre Fleury, going to be a Hall of Famer. Mr. Congeniality.
Yes. I mean, who doesn't love Marc-Andre Fleury? Even his opponents love him. He always has a smile on his face. He's always friendly. He's always happy. And he likes to play practical jokes on his teammates. So he was also very fun to write about. And I enjoyed speaking to him, even though our cell phone reception was terrible. And he I had to ask him every question 2 or 3 times. And he had to answer every question 2 or 3 times. I think it worked out okay. And I got a sense of who he was, which is very friendly, and he's just a very happy person, and he's happy to be playing this late in the game.
Right. And Jocelyn Thibault quote from your book: "Fleury is like chocolate. You cannot not like chocolate."
Yeah. Well, I
He's that
certainly
kind of
cannot
likable guy.
not like
Yeah.
chocolate.
Yeah.
It's gotten me through some hard times. I love my friend Chocolate, but yeah, I mean, Fleury's to this day, people will say good things about him. I interviewed Jonathan Taves when Fleury was playing there very briefly in Chicago, and Taves is always very stone faced, when you're speaking to him. But when I asked him about Fleury, he lit up. He had this big smile on his face, and he's like, "Sure, I'll answer questions about Fleury." That
Right.
speaking says a lot about him.
So you mentioned that in the book, he learned something in Cape Breton. If you don't understand something, just smile and nod your head.
Yeah, that's when he wasn't that great with English when he first started on his career path, and I don't know if he's still doing that. I think he understands more, but he's still smiling and shaking his head. So it's hard to say.
Right. But some spectacular work by a guy who's almost 40 years old, still going strong.
Yeah,
What do you think makes him able to do what he does?
I think like despite his affability and the way he presents himself, I think he, like the other goalies, is a fiery competitor. And when he's on the ice, he just wants to be the best on the ice, and he wants to keep winning games. So, despite his persona, he also is a very intense competitor, and he stayed relatively healthy. So why not keep playing? He loves the game. He said that many times. People write me off, but I keep playing because I love it.
Yeah, and you talked about an affable guy, a likable guy. So even when Matt Murray took over, became the number one goalie, and in that second or third cup run, I can't remember which it was. He didn't have any problem with that at all, did he? You know,
No, and this is the thing that I found very interesting is that I interviewed several of people that played with him, including goalies, and even the people who were competing with him for the starting position, they have nothing but good things to say about him. And he's always gracious and generous with his time, even for people who are competing with him for the starting position on a team.
right? That's obviously not always the case. Henrik
Yeah,
Lundqvist, the class act, classy
yeah,
guy, good-looking guy.
yeah.
Tell us about Henrik.
Well, I called him a class act for two reasons. One is because, like you said, he's well known for his fashion sense, and his expensive European designer suits and whatnot. And he does go to fashion shows, so I thought that's kind of classy in a way. And then he's also so devoted to raising money for charity and charitable pursuits. I thought that's also extremely classy. So to me, that's what classy means. Those are those two separate elements. And he was a classy guy insofar as he answered all my questions, and he connected me with one of his teammates to do more interviews. So I was really impressed with him, and I enjoyed doing the interview, and I liked reading about him and researching. And again, not a kind of guy who's a lot of people have negative things to say about. Like, he's also very popular with his teammates.
Interesting fact. His brother Joel got drafted 137 spots ahead of Henrik. Hard to
Yeah,
believe this guy almost didn't get drafted at all and is in the Hall
I
of
know.
Fame. What made
Yeah,
him
the race.
special as a goaltender?
I think they were worried about drafting him because they thought he lacks consistency. That was something that they were worried about. They thought, you know what, though, we need a goaltender. Let's just take a flyer on him. It was way deep into the draft. One of the scouts had liked him, another one didn't. But I think it was Dan Maloney at the time just said, you know what, let's just take him and see what happens. And well, you can see what happened. He's one of the best European goalies in NHL history.
Won an Olympic gold medal. People magazine, one of the world's most beautiful people. That's an interesting distinction for an NHL goaltender.
Oh, not just that. He was on GQ's best dress list. He went to like an event in Milan and New York Fashion Week. Like, the man knew how to dress. He knows how to dress. So not a lot of hockey
Yeah,
players do.
yeah.
You ever see
Compare
the
him
video?
to
You
yeah.
see the video of the players walking into the
Right.
rink for the games. And I think just 2 nights ago, they showed Austin Matthews walking in, and he was wearing, I had no idea what he was wearing. It looked like gauze. Like he was
The white
wearing some,
turtleneck that was sort
yeah,
of glistening. Yeah, yeah. I remember that. Yeah, yeah,
I'm like, I
yeah.
don't know what that is, but I don't think Henrik Lundqvist would approve.
Yeah, no, wouldn't meet Henrik's approval at all. No. Okay,
Yeah.
so Carey Price, the Stoic.
Yeah. I mean, Carey Price, he's always been like a picture of calm. I'm not saying that he is calm all the time, but that's the way he presents. And he has a calming influence on the team when he's on the ice because he's just always very, I wouldn't say mellow, but on an even keel, not very emotional. And even through the last few years when he's had all these issues, with injuries and, getting treatment for substance abuse and that kind of thing, he still is extremely stoic in the way he presents. Like you've never seen him lose his temper or get emotional in front of cameras or in front of fans. So when I say stoic, I mean this is the way he presents himself and this is how he approaches life. No matter what's going on, he tries to keep that balance. And I respect that a lot, and I think the fans do too.
Yeah, you quoted a sports writer. One of the few people on the planet who could use a prescription to increase his blood pressure.
Yes. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, that's the way he was on the ice, and in the dressing room, the
yeah.
team his teammates always felt this measure of confidence, not just because he was a great goalie, but because he always seemed to have a handle on things. He never seemed like he was coming undone, even when the team was losing or had its back against the wall. And that's really great for the players because as you know, when the players have the confidence in the goaltender, they can really, achieve anything.
And so, how did this stoic ability help him as a goaltender? You think? Like, what is it about that particular character trait that would be valuable for him here?
Well, I think that's important anywhere because, as you know, goaltending is full of peaks and valleys, and he managed to like get up after a setback. And I think also the fact that he played in Montreal, you need a certain kind of temperament to be a goalie who plays in Montreal, and I think his temperament is perfect for that. One of the people I interviewed, I'm trying to remember which one it was now. Um, Sure, I have to go back and remember. One of them said to me that that's exactly what makes him perfect for that job, for playing goaltender in Montreal, because he has this even keel, and no matter what's going on around him, and there's always a lot of noise going on around the Habs, he still managed to keep this even keel and this level-headed approach to the game, which is critical in any market, but especially in a market like Montreal.
Well, he certainly kept it together all the way through. And they had that great series win over the Leafs. They got all the way to the Stanley Cup final a few years back. But
Yeah,
2014-15, he wins the
yeah,
Vezina, the Jennings, the
hmm
Hart, and
hmm
Ted Lindsay trophies. And he capped it off with the Lou Marsh Award.
yeah.
Anybody ever going to accomplish that feat again?
I don't want to never say never, because we never anticipated Connor McDavid after Gretzky. So
Right.
you don't know, but um, it'll be tough. I think that season for Price ranks up there with, Esposito's rookie season. It's just one of those seasons that's for the ages, and it'll be a long time before someone replicates that season.
Yeah. Connor's unbelievable, but you know what? He's not going to win the Vezina.
That's
So
true. That
you're
only award
yeah.
does not win, and the Norris.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So your quote, he broke new ground by displaying, wait for it, emotion. And
Yeah, a little bit
yeah,
occasionally. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That was when he was back on the ice after he'd been away for a while, and the fans greeted him rapturously. So I guess he felt obligated to smile, something like that.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot now. You've written about 24 great goaltenders, 24 of the greatest of
Yeah.
all time. Who do you think is the best?
Oh, I always get asked this question, and I always anger some people, but I think it's really tough to compare goalies of today to goalies of 40, 50 years ago for many reasons. One is because the nutrition, the equipment, the technology, the lifestyle, everything's different. But also, it's a generational bias. I've seen Hasek play, I've seen Roy play, I've seen Martin Brodeur play. I never saw Terry Sawchuk play, but from what I've heard, Terry Sawchuk was an amazing goalie. You know, um, I never saw Turk Broda play. Like, who among us
Hmm.
has? So it's hard to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
But it's kind of like comparing Babe Ruth to Barry Bonds. I remember when that was a topic of conversation. So it's really impossible But I'd say my personal favorite of the goalies I've seen, I would say my favorite would be Hasek. I just thought that athleticism and the acrobatic way he approached the game, for me, that really did it for me. I really loved watching him. And I also lived in Prague in the 90s, when Hasek
Oh,
was at his
okay.
best. So by osmosis, I became a Hasek fan and a Yager fan. But
Right.
there's always people that will disagree. I get it all the time. My friends that are like, "How could you pick Hasek? Look at Brodeur," and their stats, and it's just a perpetual conversation. But so I know I'll anger some people by saying Hasek, but that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. You were talking about Stanley Cup. You're talking about World
Yeah,
Championship, and you're talking about Olympic gold medals in 1998.
yeah,
You might have been in Prague at the time. That must have been
I was,
unbelievable.
I
It must have been
was. And,
unbelievable.
I remember that I think his goals against average in that Olympic tournament was under one. I just like, how many goaltenders have a goaltending average of under one in any competition? So yeah, and I was living in Prague at the time. So when the Czechs won, they stopped in Prague for a big rally on their way back to their NHL teams, and I was there at that rally, and it was just like he could have been elected president that day, him and or Yager, but really it was Hasek that lifted that team to the gold medal, not Yager.
No doubt about that. With the goals against under one,
Yeah.
that's phenomenal. Okay, so what's the next book? What's going to be in the next book?
I think that I'd like to write another book about goalies. I have some ideas percolating, but right now, like when people say to me, "Oh, when are you going to write another book?" It's like saying to a woman who's just given birth, like, "Oh, when are you getting pregnant again?" And
Yeah.
the answer is, just give me some time to recover. So I think by the end of the year, I'll start talking to my publisher about another book. But for now, I'm just relaxing a little bit. The writing's over. I'm more focused on the publicity and promotions now. So that's my focus. But I think, again, by the end of the year, I'll probably be thinking about another book about goalies because they're so fascinating and they're fun to write about. As you can tell from,
Right.
reading the book, that I like to have fun when I write. And so goaltenders provide ample material for doing that.
Right. And you talk about it's like asking a pregnant woman when she's going to have just had a baby when she's going to get pregnant again. Like Roger Crozier's mother might have been asked that a few times.
Yeah, like maybe after child number 12.
Maybe we're 12. When are you going to have another one?
Yeah, I think
So
I'm gonna.
okay, this question I like to ask my guests is, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, actually, there's best advice in terms of my professional or personal life.
Whatever, personal, you pick.
I would say just like perseverance. Like when I got into journalism, I had a professor who said to me, "It's a tough field um, to find a job, then to distinguish yourself, then to if you write magazine articles or books or whatever, you're getting a lot of doors slammed in your face. Not just by prospective employers, but by potential interview subjects and sometimes readers or viewers. But just stick to it. Like just keep going." And I think I've developed a bit of a thick skin over the years. And I think I always remember that prof and what he told me at that time. So that was some great advice. And then there's other advice about dating and things like that
Yeah,
where I
yeah.
got from other women, but I won't go into that here.
Right. No, that's great advice. I mean, because that big break could just be just around the next corner. You just never know. You just keep
Yeah.
plugging away, put one foot in front of the other. It just might just be there.
Yeah. And then for every interview, I got and did for the book, there was 4 people who would be like, no, not interested, you know, but you can't let that get you down. You have to keep making the phone calls and sending the emails and sticking to it and believing in yourself. I know that sounds like a cliche, but you have to have that
Right.
confidence in order to persevere.
Okay. Once again, the book is Behind the Mask. Great book, well written, a must for the hockey fan in your life. Get it today. Thank you for being on the program, Randy. Really appreciate it. Great to have you
Thank
on.
you.
Best of luck with the
A lot of
book
fun.
and the next one.
Thank you.
All right. We'll have more when we come back.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca.
MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great folks. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian and local sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, as well as the Spanglish Network, Buzz TV, and Zingo TV Live. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past great shows and clips, some shorts are on there. Like and subscribe. It's absolutely free. Thanks once again to Randi Druzin for being on the show. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. And let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678.
Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit sleepyhollowcountryclub.com. Hi there, I'm Joe Tilley. Are you ready for an adventure of a lifetime? Next March, during the enchanting cherry blossom season, join me and my wife for an unforgettable 2-week journey to Japan and South Korea. In Japan, you'll experience the magic of the season as we visit the stunning Osaka Castle against a backdrop of cherry blossoms. Feed the adorable Sika deer at Nara Park, glide through picturesque landscapes on the famed bullet train, cruise on Lake Kawaguchi, and witness the awe-inspiring view of Mount Fuji. Relax in natural hot springs and savor a delightful Fuji dinner banquet while dressing in traditional robes. And of course, we'll dive into Tokyo's cutting-edge technology scene. In Korea, dress in elegant hanbok attire and step back in time at Cheongdokgung Palace. Wander through Andong Village, a true glimpse into Korea's rich heritage. Delight your taste buds with the flavors of Korean barbecue. We'll even visit the DMZ area to get a glimpse of mysterious North Korea. And guess what? This incredible journey is all yours for just $54.99, all-inclusive, with direct flights from Vancouver, or $58.99 from Toronto. Book now to unlock up to an extra $1,700 in upgrades and savings. Let's make some memories. Let's explore. Let's travel.
Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.